Namaste. It's great to be on Citti Media again, and I look forward to our conversation.
Oh, it's all our pleasure. You're writing a new book, or you've already written a new book about tribal warriors. What exactly has been the role of tribal warriors in Indian history? And was the revolt of 1857 the first war of independence in Bharat's history?
Well, we have grown up reading about what I call the mainstream freedom movement. But if you dig deeper into the freedom movement, there existed a parallel freedom movement, the subaltern freedom movement, which far, far predated the recorded or the mainstream freedom movement of which we have heard or of which we have grown up reading. And this subaltern movement dates back to 1765. The first tribal warrior, recorded tribal warrior, was Raghunath Mahato. In 1784, Tilka Maji led a revolution, led a revolt in the Bhagalpur area. And subsequently, by the start of the 19th century, tribal revolts were being reported from across the country. There was U. Tirot Singh in the north. There were scores of freedom fighters in Jharkhand, then a part of Bengal. But my latest release, the cover of which I just unveiled 2 days ago, is about the Santhal War of 1855, which I believe was at par with the 1857 revolt. In terms of its geography, it expanded from Bhagalpur in the present Bihar, Bhagalpur and Purnia areas in the present Bihar, to the northern districts of Jharkhand, which is Sahibganj, Pakur, Rajmahal, and Dumka areas. And towards the east, it expanded to several districts of Bengal. And it was very sporadic. It occurred in bits and it occurred in phases where it was led by an ordinary tribal family, the Murmu family, where 6 siblings got together, 4 brothers, Siddho, Kano, Chand, Bhairav, and 2 sisters, Phulo and I'm just forgetting the last sister's name. So Phulo and Janu. So 6 of them fought together, led this revolution over a period of 8 to 9 months. And, there was phases, obviously, where they were suppressed by the British forces. And yet, within weeks, they would fight back with renewed vigor from a different part of that entire region. So around 50,000 people fought this war, I would say, and 10,000 people. And even though it was started by tribals, it was started by Santhals, eventually it led to all joining in. So in many ways, it was a precursor to 1857. In fact, it is believed that many of the sepoys used by British to suppress this revolt eventually got killed in the 1857 revolt. And that is one of the reasons why for many decades, proper and authenticated records of the movement of this war were not available. But I think 2014 onwards has been a good time to revisit these stories, to retell these stories, because I think there has been a concerted attempt, starting from the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister himself, to kind of remove the colonial mindset with which we viewed our history, remove the aristocratic skew, the communist skew that had seeped into our history. And I think these tribal warriors need to be celebrated because they have played an immense role in setting the discourse or in supplementing the mainstream freedom movement of which we know. So the first part of my trilogy was a book on Birsa Munda, the legend of Birsa Munda, that was released 2 years ago. It's now available in multiple languages. The second was The Great Tribal Warriors of Bharat. And Siddho Kanu, which we are releasing on Hool Divas. That the commemoration day of the start of that revolution is called Hool Divas. I don't know whether you are aware of it, but in the eastern part of the country, and that's the whole idea, to mainstream it. For the first time, Hool Divas should be celebrated in Delhi with the release of the book and in a big way. So that's the objective of the book.
We extend our congratulations to you for covering this topic, which hardly people know about or even bother to know about. But what exactly
Thank
made
you.
you choose this area of expertise?
See, I have grown up in Jamshedpur. I spent the first 18 years over there, and Jamshedpur is a place. In fact, most of Jharkhand is a place where the urban pockets and the tribal areas merge seamlessly with one another.
Yeah.
So, like just outside the urban clusters of Jamshedpur, Ranchi, Bokaro, you will find lots and lots of tribal hamlets or um, tribal villages. So, the names of Birsa Munda, Sidhu Kano would invariably crop up during our growing up years. We would find a statue of Birsa Munda here, or a reference of Sidhu Kano. But there was an unquenched thirst to discover more about them, because when one would want to know more about them, there was very limited information available. So I think I grew up with that curiosity to discover more about them. And like I said, we grew up at a time where history had a very strong communist skew. It was not fashionable to talk about these freedom warriors, no matter how important their contribution may have been to our discourse. But a lot of things changed post 2014. I think Prime Minister Modi's very clear, unambiguous attempt to own up to the legacy of our tribal warriors has been a big game changer. And why it's very important is that, I had a launch of my previous book, Birsa Munda, in Ranchi. Post that, I traveled to a small village of Mundas, some 60 kilometers away from Ranchi, and I visited a government school where third and fourth standard students, mainly girls, were studying, and mainly they were from the Munda family, the same tribal community.
Yeah.
So while they were all aware of Birsa Munda, when you would start talking to them, you would realize that like their knowledge is limited to hearsay. So I think it is important for this tribal community to own up to their very illustrious contribution to the country. And that would also give them a greater sense of belongingness to the nationalist discourse, which we want the tribal community to subscribe to own up to. In fact, pre-2014, in fact, if I may just expand it beyond the book, many of the tribal areas were vulnerable to Naxal influences. Yeah. And one of the reasons was that they were never given a sense of belongingness, which again was due to complete apathy and lack of basic amenities. For example, if you had a sanitation cover of 39% in 2014 and you have 100% sanitation cover now, you can figure out the kind of the kind of transformation that has taken place in the last 9 years. Yeah. Similarly, the Nal Se Jal program has been a big game changer. So these basic amenities being made available to the poorest of tribal population has given them a sense of ownership. What I have tried to do through my books is give them a sense of cultural ownership. Yeah. Acquaint them with their prized, illustrious legacy. There are around 70 lakh Santals in this country. My latest book, there are hundreds of tribal communities. In fact, we know so little about the tribal community that the Santal community is very different from the Munda community. The Munda community is very different from the Orao community. And I'm talking only about Jharkhand. When you come to the western parts of the country, there is the Bhil community. In Maharashtra and in Andhra, there is the Gond community. So the latest book, Sidhu Kano, is about the Santhal community. And in fact, the dedication to the book reads, it's for the 70 lakh Santals in this country, the present generation of which knows very little of the pivotal role played by their forefathers in the freedom movement. So I think it's part of an attempt to acquaint our tribal population with their very rich legacy, which would help them, align themselves to a nationalist thought process going ahead.
Beautifully explained. Also, a beautiful cause that you've taken up. But when you talk
Thank
about,
you.
You're welcome. It's again our pleasure. all thanks are owed to you for even taking up this oft ignored cause. But when you talk of cultural ownership, then obviously these people have been ignored for a really long time, like you just mentioned. Apart from that, what are the other reasons why the tribal areas, the tribal communities have always been more vulnerable to missionary movements?
So they have not only been ignored, they have been misled. And they have been misled by those politicians or those political parties who have pretended to take care of them. For example, people like Hemant Soren, the present CM of Jharkhand. If you remember, 2 years ago, he had made a very irresponsible comment on a foreign platform. He was addressing the Harvard students. He was addressing a Harvard students community online, and he said very assertively that Adivasis don't belong to the Hindu communities. They never did. They never will. And I think that was a very mischievous comment, because somewhere, unless you are acting at the behest of the conversion lobby, which some of these politicians, I don't have proof to say they do, but their behavior has been suspect. They make irresponsible comments against the Hindu community, especially when it comes to the tribal population. That includes Y. Jagan Reddy, the Andhra CM, and that includes Hemant Soren, the Jharkhand CM. So I rebutted his claim with an exhaustive article, which I had written at that point of time for the print. In fact, long ago, I had a long conversation with Kariya Mundaji, who was the longest serving member of parliament of Lok Sabha at one point of time. I think he was a member of parliament from 1977 till 2014. And he was also the deputy speaker of the Lok Sabha from 2014 to 2019. So he's very clear about the fact that the Adivasi community is an intrinsic part of the Sanatan Dharma. But unfortunately, when you have some of the other politicians like Hemant Soren, in some ways tacitly supporting the conversion lobby, then obviously, apart from being ignored, the Adivasi community in India was also misled. And obviously, there were political interests which these people, Hemant Soren and the like, were trying to nurture. So I think, my attempt to reach out to the Adivasi community through this legacy of freedom fighters from their communities, also an attempt to somewhere clear those misconceptions for them. In fact, I have referred to an article, a very exhaustive research paper, which talks about the Adivasis community intrinsic link to Sanatan Dharma. Shiva, who we worship in temples, has always been worshipped by them in the jungles and forests. And you would invariably find carvings of Shiva even in the most ancient of times.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, that is the larger objective of these books of mine, to kind of dispel many of the misconceptions, which I do by way of narrative building in addition to the book, through these conversations such as the one which I'm having with you right now.
Have any modern Indian governments, either of the BJP or of Congress, have they taken any steps for their inclusion and upliftment since independence? Or like you mentioned that since 2014, some steps have been taken. Can you elaborate on some of them?
See, let me put it this way. When you directly give them sops, any community, when you directly give them sops, that amounts to appeasement. But when you make certain basic facilities available to them, certain basic amenities available to them, which for strange reasons were denied all these years, I think that is real empowerment. And if you look at the data of social welfare schemes, the beneficiaries of the social welfare schemes in the last 9 years, whether it is Swachh Bharat, whether it is Jan Sidhan Yojana, whether it is Ujjwala scheme, whether it is Nal Se Jal program, to my understanding, the biggest beneficiaries would be the poorest, who would belong to the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribes. So I think that is our way of empowering the community. We don't believe in the Congress-style SOPs and freebies, which kind of hold a community back. Our method of ensuring equality is to provide them those basic amenities which bring them at par with people across the country, people living in cities. And that while the opposition and while people like Rahul Gandhi may call us divisive, if you ask me, we are the biggest unifiers because we have bridged the gap between the rural and the urban population. Today, internet connectivity in some of the villages, but broadband connectivity is at par with the urban centers. Yeah. And that has been the big leveler. So, and if you ask me, most of the beneficiaries would belong to the SC and the ST communities because they have been the poorest and they have been the most left out from the system.
But are the SC, STs, OBCs, are they the same as Adivasi communities?
STs are
for the benefit of our viewers. Yeah.
STs are Adivasis. Scheduled tribes are.
Scheduled tribes are. So yeah. All scheduled tribes that are listed by the government, they're all Adivasis.
See, except in the Northeast, there are different norms, but otherwise, all Adivasis would belong to the scheduled tribes. I'm not very clear about the eligibility in the Northeast yet. But apart from that, in all the other parts of the country, scheduled tribes would belong to Adivasis would belong to the scheduled tribes.
So basically, my question is that all the Adivasi tribes, they are covered by the scheduled tribes and they would be able to avail of the benefits of various government schemes that are open to
Absolutely.
Scheduled tribes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Moving on to Assam. So CM Hemant Biswa Sharma ji's government has recently brought about a ban on polygamy. And I want to know your views about that.
Well, first of all, let me compliment Hemanta Biswa because the way he has stuck on to our nationalist thought process and the Hindutva agenda in Assam is phenomenal because Assam has a 36% Muslim population. So with the kind of misconceptions that the opposition spreads about the BJP, it takes a lot of, strategizing. It requires genius planning to execute what Hemanta Biswa is doing in Assam. So just to correct you, that has not been implemented, but that is a wonderful start. He has made a legal committee to look into that. And I think the biggest, if you look at it in the last 10 days, ever since he has made the announcement, have you heard of a single protest against that in any district of Assam? I think that is the true genius of the man. He has embarked on a path of transformation, social transformation, but at the same time, he does it with such adroit handling of the situation. He takes all stakeholders into account and he kind of convinces the community, which is no easy thing to do, convincing the minority community, especially when you have the Congress party and most of the opposition who are hell-bent on misleading them for their political purposes. So he manages to get the better of the Congress community and manages to convince the minority community that, listen, this is something which is going to benefit the community in the long run. So take a macro view, look at the larger picture and do what I'm saying. Similarly, there are a lot of other things which he has embarked upon. UCC might be a reality in Assam soon. And I think UCC should, the time has come for India to have UCC at the national level. It's a good experiment to have state governments initiate it as a first step, because UCC is complicated. It is more about gender equality, but again, the way the opposition of this country has been misleading the minority population, most of these positive and proactive social reforms have got mired in all sorts of controversies in the past. The best time for UCC was actually 1955, when the Hindu Marriage Act was introduced in Parliament. The second best time, if you ask me, was the Shah Bano case of 1985. But unfortunately, instead of uh, using the opportunity to unleash certain social reforms for the minority community, Rajiv Gandhi actually bowed under pressure of the radicals and made the community to take 2 steps back. So it's a very positive era that we are in right now. A whole lot of reforms which changes which we had never anticipated or never thought would happen are finally seeing the light of the day. And I think in the next 5 years, most of these should be a reality in the country.
Yeah. But when you talk about polygamy and a suggested ban on it, there are people who say that polygamy was also a practice in Hinduism, and it's an Adam dharma itself. So this is not something religion specific at all.
No, so it's about moving with the times. When the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955 was introduced, there were sections within the Hindu community that were opposed to it. But eventually, going ahead in a world, where gender equality was to be at the core of human development, the Hindu community, by and large, showed a certain large-heartedness and accepted the change. But the problem at that point of time was that even Nehru was too soft on the minority community. He believed in pampering. And it's not just the minority community. Even in Arunachal, I was told by somebody that there are some tribes which still have polygamy existing in it.
And there's actually also a tribe up north in the hills. They practice polyandry. So it's a very common.
But essentially, the larger point over here is that, in a world where gender equality is extremely important for various reasons, and also to avoid dysfunctional families in the future, I think all communities need to be at par, need to be in sync on this issue. And like I said, 4 years ago, there were opposition to triple talaq bill. The usual suspects, India's opposition parties, tried to stall it. Today, the Muslim community has accepted it. I think sooner than later, a time will come when all of them would realize, or even if they don't realize, I think it will be good for the future of humanity that we remove the scope for dysfunctional families, we remove the scope for gender inequality, which is where the UCC would become very important.
I'm talking about, so UCC again, is it going to be a part of BJP's manifesto for 2024?
See, UCC has, if you ask me, has always been a part of our manifesto. In the same way that removal of Article 370 was.
Yeah.
In the same way as construction of Ram Mandir was. But then we waited for the right time.
Yeah.
I think we enjoy the other side asking us, Tariq kab bataoge, because that kind of spurs us on. We never get under pressure because we know that these things require extensive deliberation. These things require a certain timing. So while, on the one hand, abrogation of Article 370 is a reality today, construction of Ram Mandir is a reality, I'm pretty confident that sooner than later, the UCC will be a reality. In fact, state governments, on this particular issue and on the government control over mandirs, the strategy has been slightly different. State governments have been taking the lead, which in a way is a good thing, because a pan-national attempt sometimes, gets more difficult to be put across. But if state governments execute UCC at the state level, and over a period of time, we see the success of it, obviously that paves the way for the implementation of it at the national level more seamlessly and more easily.
Yeah, but speaking of implementation, UCC has always been on national level agenda, and even the laws are national level, right? They're all central laws, except the marriage registration acts, which I believe are state specific. So if at all any step has to be taken, it will have to be a central level step. And you mentioned that, BJP is waiting for the right time. So is the right time here?
The opportunity throws itself. Like I said, I mean, Article 370, similar questions were, people would provoke us from the other side. Tariq ka bataoge, BJP makes all claims. But then a situation also arises where, in fact, UCC is not an uncharted territory anymore, because at the local level, states like Uttarakhand, states like Goa have already initiated it. So I think sooner than later, in the next, whatever, I cannot comment on the time, a time will emerge where there will be a natural consensus for it, which would make it much easier to push it through.
Wishing you all the very.
But we enjoy, we thrive on the Tariq ka bataoge challenge.
Wishing you all the best.
That I think that brings out the best in us.
Yeah. And while we're still talking about elections, let's talk about the 2024 elections and all the sub-state elections which are coming up, the 5 state elections.
Sure.
Speaking of Telangana, they are saying that there's an alleged divide in the BJP cadres on whether BJP is going to stick to a hardline Hindutva approach or it's going to attack CM K. Chandrasekhar Rao's policies instead. What are your comments on that?
See, Hindutva is a matter of ideology for us. So whether we are vocal about it in the same way as we were in Karnataka or otherwise, in fact, our being vocal about it depends to a large extent on us being provoked on certain issues. For example, the attempt in Karnataka to equate Bajrang Dal with PFI was a very notorious and a very malified act by the Congress party, and that is when we retaliated and came out strongly against the ban. But at the same time, on the ground, our issues have always been very specific and very, very focused on development issues. And it's a fact today that infrastructure development across the country is so visible that would be the mainstay of our election campaign. Having said that, development and our commitment to Hindutva go hand in hand. If Telangana KCR decides to provoke us with a similar ban on Bajrang Dal, then obviously we would give it back to him. I don't think these are extraneous issues. Hindutva and development have always gone hand in hand for the BJP, and the strategy would be the same even in Telangana and in other states. Probably in Karnataka, if you ask me, we had underestimated the anti-incumbency factor. And in state elections, normally, the anti-incumbency factor builds up very fast. One, I think people are more impatient at the state level. But when it comes to the national level, they are more aligned with the larger picture, with the larger vision for the country. And in fact, from 1996 onwards, if you ask me, 1996 was when the country saw, between 96 and 99, the country saw 2 governments, or 3 governments, including Mr. Devagowda as Prime Minister. So I think then onwards, the people of the country have been very adroit in their voting preferences. They vote differently in the national election and they vote differently in the state election. So while we, as a party which is always in the self-introspective mode, we would rectify the mistakes of Karnataka, I don't think there is much to worry for the 2024 elections.
Interestingly, even Congress in parts of the country, you can see Congress suddenly shifting to the Hindutva agenda, something which they've not done before. And do you think this is the 2014 BJP effect, and of course the 2019 BJP?
The Congress at this point of time, the way it is operating, the Congress party is dangerous for the country. Let me put it that way. I think 3 days after the formation or 2 days after the formation of the Karnataka government, look at the steps which they have undertaken. They have put on hold all development initiative, all development projects of the previous government, because they know that they have to somehow implement the freebies promised, or else the credibility will be at stake, and they will not be able to show their faces in the Madhya Pradesh elections.
Yeah.
But if freebies is everything, then obviously in any which way you are taking the country back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and besides, a party which has tie-ups with SDPI, the political avatar of SDGP, or the political avatar of PFI, which has alliances with Badruddin Ajmal in Assam. How do you expect that party to think, positively about the country going forward? This is the party which tacitly, which will encourage a distortion of our demography. This is the party which immediately lapped up Maulana Tawqir after he had made some absurd anti-Hindu rants just before the Uttarakhand elections. So Congress has a lot to answer. I'm sure in the next 1 month or two, the failures of the Carnatic government would expose it so badly that it would not have a chance, much of a chance in the elections in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh later this year.
Yeah, but it's not like they've stopped making promises of freebies. They're still making these promises in Madhya Pradesh.
They have no other option. They know that, till about a year back, they were facing their gravest existential crisis. So to prolong their existence, they have embarked upon a very nefarious agenda where they know that they are willing to sell the country to prolong their existence. I don't think freebies was the only reason they won. Like I mentioned, there were issues with the previous BJP government in Karnataka, and we underestimated the anti-incumbency factor. But like I mentioned in one sentence, the Congress party, the way it stands today, is dangerous for the future of the country, and sooner than later, people of this country are going to realize it. So while in state elections, they might give it a chance just to try, there are times when people get enticed with some very rosy promises which the Congress party is making. But when they see the collapse of infrastructure, when they see the collapse in law and order in the respective states, they will realize just how wild and just how irresponsible the Congress is for the country.
Now, speaking of Telangana elections, cow is expected to be a major agenda for the elections. And recently, even in Karnataka, it was found that right after the elections, Congress party members, they were sprinkling Gomutra on the Vidhan Sabha to apparently purify it. So what's BJP's take, apart from, of course, their publicity stunts? What is BJP's take going to be on this issue of large importance to Hindus?
Well, the Congress party is it's a false Hindutva party. So it might, an imposter can never be as good as the real one. And in any case, in the last Madhya Pradesh, just before the last Madhya Pradesh elections, there was a video of Kamal Nath, if I'm not mistaken, Kamal Nath, yes, that got exposed, where he's telling the Muslim community that while we might go to the temples, while we might profess our affection for the Hindu community, we will always be with you. That is something you need to realize. So Congress party thrives on duplicity, it thrives on dubious behavior. I think Muslim community, somewhere voted in a tactical manner in Karnataka because they didn't have much of an option. The Aam Aadmi party contested all seats over there to do what they are very good at, losing and forfeiting the deposit. Asaduddin Owaisi stands exposed. Even the Muslims don't trust him. So somewhere Karnataka was a situation where 90% of the Muslim votes got accumulated behind the Congress party.
Yeah.
But going ahead, Congress is a party which doesn't enjoy the faith of the Hindu community, the trust of the Hindu community. And while Muslims in Karnataka may have voted en bloc for the Congress party in a tactical voting, in some of the states at least, either the opposition very cleverly creates a situation where in every state, like Nitish does not allow the Congress party to enter Bihar, or Mamata Banerjee does not allow the Congress to. I think the Muslim community equally does not trust the Congress community. The Congress has kept them backward. The Congress has made sure that they were deprived of basic amenities. And if you go by pure data, when we have succeeded with our social welfare schemes, the beneficiaries in large numbers include ST, SC, OBC, and Muslims. Yeah. Because purely in terms of data, the Muslim community has, a large percentage of them has been below the poverty line. A large percentage of them needed upliftment, which our social welfare schemes have provided them. Yeah. So, I don't, the bottom line is that the Karnataka election need not be a precursor, or it need not give you a vision of things to come. The Congress party will wither out, and I doubt whether they will manage to retain the trust of either the Hindus or the Muslims going ahead, not at the national level for sure.
Tuhinji, so the Kerala story, besides the ISIS agenda, also shows how demographic changes are affected in states. It is in fact the story of European nations too now. How can India fight or adapt to these changes?
Well, like you mentioned, yes, the demography war is a global scourge at this point of time. In fact, most of Europe has been coping with it, has been grappling with it. In the UK, it is known by a different, love jihad is known by a different name. They call it the grooming gangs. And fortunately, Rishi Sunak has been candid about it. He has been talking about it. Unfortunately, in our country, politicians like Mamata Banerjee can do anything for their vote bank. And her decision to ban the movie, which was eventually undone by the Honorable Supreme Court, should make her introspect about who exactly is she trying to cater to. Because to my understanding, the only organization or the only people that the movie is against is the ISIS. Way back in 2009, the Kerala High Court had passed a ruling where it had categorically mentioned that there were 3,000 to 4,000 women at that point of time, which is 14 years ago. It had mentioned that there are 3,000 to 4,000 women who seem to have been unnaturally converted, and asked the government to frame laws to curb the practice of love jihad. So this term has its place, or has found its way in the ruling of the Kerala High Court. Two former CMs, Omen Chandi and V. Achyutanandan, have spoken against it. V. Achyutanandan in 2010 had even mentioned that by 2030, if the PFI is not controlled, it will convert Kerala into a Muslim majority state. And obviously, when he meant that, he was implying that love jihad would be extensively used to fulfill the nefarious designs of the PFI. So I don't understand why some politicians always want to be in denial, why they always want to compromise the interests of the country. In fact, this brings me back to Rahul Gandhi. He is the member of parliament from Wayanad. Shashi Tharoor represents a constituency in Kerala. Have you even once heard them talk of the malaise of love jihad? In fact, Shashi Tharoor was one of the first people to come out and make fun of the movie. And that, also exposes the duplicity of the Congress party. If radicalization, is the biggest problem in any, Kerala is one of the few states where radicalization poses the biggest threat to the social fabric of the state. But not once has a Congress MP spoken about it. In fact, during the Bharat Jodo Yatra, the person who accompanied Rahul Gandhi at one point, at a certain stretch in Kerala, was Rajil Makuti, the guy who has butchered a calf in 2017.
Yes.
So it is very unfortunate that demography, the distortion of demography has been a planned practice by certain state governments in India. In Assam, the Congress governments had encouraged it for many decades. In fact, the entire Assam movement in the late 1970s and early 1980s, which led to the formation of the Assam Gana Parishad government of Prafull Mohanta for the first time in 1985, was a result of the concerted campaign against illegal migrants. And who was responsible for illegal migrants? The previous Congress governments. So Congress governments and politicians like Nitish Kumar, the RJD, I mean, Lalu and his son, Mamta Banerjee, they can go to any extent to appease a certain radicalized section of a society, which makes them very dangerous for the future of our country.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Rijul Makuti incident, because they had brought like a small calf and like a huge crowd of the Indian National Congress, the youth wing. They had butchered this calf in public as some act of bravery or bravado. It was one of the most heinous things that's ever happened, and they've never bothered to even comment on it.
Rather, Rahul Gandhi was hobnobbing with him, which clearly indicates that his Bharat Jodo Yatra was rather an attempt to unify some of the crooked elements in the society, and it was never really a Bharat Jodo Yatra.
More like a Bharat Todo Yatra. The object seems to be that. Anyway, moving on, since we are talking about demography changes, would you like to comment on the Hindu migrants' homes that were destroyed, bulldozed over by the Ashok Gehlot government? Because, like I've mentioned earlier as well, that on one hand you have them bulldozing Hindu migrants' homes in Rajasthan, and on the other hand of the country you have West Bengal, where
Well, that shows the basic difference of philosophy and character between the BJP and the Congress Party and Mamata Banerjee in Bengal. We bulldoze the homes of mafia dons. We bulldoze the homes of people who are hostile to the peace in our society, and they bulldoze the homes of poor migrants who have no other place to sustain themselves.
And who are persecuted.
I can only hope the state unit of the BJP takes it up very aggressively and ensures that the bulldozed homes are rebuilt or the migrant population is sheltered and protected till such time they are able to kind of come out of the uncertainty in their lives. But what Ashok Gehlot has done, I think, he has a history of appeasing the minority community at the expense of the Hindu community. So I'm sure there are multiple other, the list is long where he has acted against Hindu migrants, where he has acted unfairly against the Hindu community. And I just hope the state unit takes all of these up very aggressively and make sure that the state government is put on the mat.
Last year, a Gaushala and a temple were also razed down by the Rajasthan government.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, but will the BJP be taking any active steps or any positive affirming steps with respect to these Hindu migrants who are coming from the neighboring countries and who are badly persecuted there?
Well, the CA was an attempt in that direction, even though the rules, the specific rules have not been framed. I'm still hoping that will happen sooner. But the BJP community, the BJP governments per se, have always stood up for the rights of the Hindu migrants from across. In fact, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, we ensured that the Sikhs and the minorities were brought back in the country in the largest numbers possible. So we've always stood up for the rights of the Hindu migrants and displaced Hindu migrants. And we would continue to do that more vigorously in future, because unfortunately, Pakistan is an embarrassment to the civilization. So, diplomatically, such things cannot be taken up, or even when they are taken up, they don't have the desired impact in Pakistan. Wherever the Hindu migrants have been tortured, like, in the recent example being the Ashok Gehlot government's attempt, or it's bulldozing their homes, the state units should take this up very aggressively and make sure that such a thing is not repeated in the respective state.
Can we expect anything on the CA rules front before the elections?
Let us hope for the best. We are hoping it should happen.
The last thing that we can discuss for the day is that, a lot of people, the new Parliament building has come up, but there are people from, of course, the opposite side, and of course, regular people also, who have a problem with PM Modi inaugurating the building. What's your take on that?
Well, intellectual dishonesty has been the hallmark of the Congress party. In 1975, when a Parliament Annex building was inaugurated, it was inaugurated by the then Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. In 1986, Rajiv Gandhi had similarly inaugurated an expansion or a new block in Parliament. So I don't see a reason why they should have a problem with Prime Minister Modi inaugurating it.
Yeah.
And in fact, yesterday's tweets of Kharge linking it with a Dalit president not being given her due are the most distasteful, are the most obnoxious tweets which a Congress president can put up. It is the Congress party which has a history of subjugating Dalit leaders, whether it is B.R. Ambedkar, whether it is Sitaram Kesri, or Babu Jagjeevan Ram, who was unfairly denied the post of Prime Minister, because of which he moved away from the Congress party in 1979. So I don't think the Congress has a right to speak on these issues, and Rahul Gandhi should right now focus on returning to Parliament, because, I think only members of Parliament should ideally be talking about who should be inaugurating the new building. When it comes to the new building, again, the Congress has made a lot of ugly noises about the amount spent on it, without, by very conveniently negating the fact that the new Parliament is not a luxury, it was a necessity. Because by 2026, our Parliament will be going in for a delimitation exercise, where the members of Parliament for both houses would be increased by at least 35%. The existing Parliament just does not have the infrastructure or the wherewithal or the capacity to have those many people inside, which is something which Shashi Tharoor has been very categorical of in the past. But yes, like I mentioned, intellectual dishonesty has been the hallmark of the Congress party. In any case, they don't attend Parliament. They are very good at bunking. So I don't think they will be attending the new Parliament as, similarly, they will be bunking, they will continue to bunk the new Parliament at all. And also,
would you like to make any comment on the 2,000 rupee note move that has recently been brought about by the government? And we know that the note will continue to be legal tender. Still, there are people protesting against the move. And there are, of course, memes on social media and other voices as well who are misleading the public.
These are habitual. These are habitual protesters. At one point of time, we used to have 5 paise, 10 paise coins. Do we have them now? I think there are certain routine procedures. There are certain routine processes. When in 2016, 2,000 rupee notes were printed in the first place, it was very clear. The objective was very clear. That was to expeditiously tide over the currency deficit resulting out of the sudden withdrawal of the existing 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. It was always meant to be a temporary measure. In fact, from 2018-19, which is a good over 4 years now, no new 2,000 rupee note has been printed. And again, the time to give it back is a good 4 months and 10 days. So there will be no queues, unlike in 2016, the Congress will not get any photo ops. But the Congress needs to realize that just like Article 370 was a temporary provision, even 2000 notes were a temporary provision. And, as a government which is anti-hoarding, cash hoarding, I think it is about time it was done away with. The Congress stands for cash hoarders, which is why they seem to be a little rattled. But the only people who might be at problem are the architects of, whether architects of the liquor scam in Delhi or the teacher scam in Kolkata.
Yeah. Or even the cattle smuggling scam in West Bengal.
And in fact, that shows the hypocrisy of Mamata Banerjee. She had posted a tweet protesting against it, whereas the maximum amount of 2,000 rupee notes were discovered from the homes of ministers' best friends, which is how these people have used hawala money to perpetrate scams even after the demonetization exercise in 2016. So I think it's end the game for TMC from here, which is why they seem to be more rattled.
And of course, this move has something to do with the upcoming elections, the timing of this move.
I don't think so. It's a routine procedure by RBI. The government would have been abreast of it. The government would have been taken into confidence, but it's entirely being executed and done by the RBI. And like I said, it's a routine procedure. Over a period of time, so many currency notes have been discontinued and new ones introduced. 2,000 rupee notes need not be there at this point of time because India's transition into digital currency in the last 6 years has been huge.
Yeah.
In fact, even today, even so many vegetable vendors and auto rickshaw drivers prefer digital currency than cash.
Yeah, they do.
So India's opposition needs to move with the times. That they can't be in a time warp, because if they continue to be in a time warp, they will probably stand no chance of winning at the national level for the next 2 decades.
Thank you for joining and taking us.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to the show.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.